And they did a study of 10,000 business owners, CEOs, executives, and asked them what's the most important thing that you get from a sales team, including the salesperson and the engineer. 80% of them said they need to know my business.
What did you look for when you were hiring? You were looking at sales candidates, right? And were you looking at resumes? How did you discern whether they were going to be a good fit for your team and to be successful in the role?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely got to look at track record, but the most important thing I look at is what I call connectedness. Like, how well do they connect with other people? How well do they hold a conversation? Do they listen more than they talk? Are they inquisitive, curious? And then you look at other things like, are they competitive? I loved college athletes, because they've got that motivation built in. So yeah, those are really, it's funny. I tried what do they call it? Personnel indexing, where they take a test, and discovered after a few months, salespeople are smart enough. They know how to answer those questions. And so I dumped that and just, started going with my instincts, including peer reviews and recommendations and things like that. But
so you had you had multiple people put eyes on the candidate.
For sure.
Ask the right questions. I think that's a great, a great method to implement. We like looking at structured interviews where we're asking specific questions that are fairly high level and trying to understand how they think about sales, how they thought about their previous sales roles. Did they understand the stuff that they really needed to understand, like how their customers made money? If I ask that, like you're selling tech right now for SBC Global, which they're not, but
right.
So how did your customers make money? What did they care about? And if they couldn't describe their customer with some detail, they weren't really thinking about sales, and they weren't necessarily committed to providing that value. Because if you don't understand your customer, it's pretty hard to be successful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got a business partner that does engineering training, and they did a study of 10,000 business owners, CEOs, executives, and asked them what's the most important thing that you get from a sales team, including the salesperson and the engineer. 80% of them said they need to know my business.
Well, and the only way you do that is to come into, because I look at the sales discovery process as a conversation that a salesperson is having with another individual.
Yes.
And they should be really curious. There should be some empathy about the problems that they're going to encounter. There should be some skepticism about why that particular prospect is doing things the way they are.
Yeah.
It's really, it shouldn't feel like it doesn't necessarily have to be comfortable for the prospect, but it definitely shouldn't feel like they're getting the third degree from, a detective or a police officer. It's just a conversation they were interacting with.
Yeah. And I often told my salespeople, it's the salesperson that cares the most that usually wins. And so you don't stop at the high level questions. You've got to, for instance, if they say my IT department is wasting time fighting cyber criminals, you got to ask how much, how many, how often. So, because that's where your value is in discovery. It's
how successful are they, right? And say,
yeah.
It's not just asking the one question and moving on and acting like a sideline reporter at a football game, right? They're just trying to wrap up 3 quick questions. But if we're not really listening to that prospect and leaning into that conversation and asking conversational questions that elicit more information because they want to talk. They want to share their problems once they realize you do care. And if you don't care, like you said, people will sense that.
Yeah.
They're not gonna relate.
When you go into a first meeting, you have barriers you need to break down. You've got to earn some trust. You got to make them feel comfortable that you can help them. But you do that with questioning, not with telling a bunch of things. Telling is selling.
Yeah, it's so true. Like being able to elicit those answers from those great questions, those good questions, those tough questions.
Yeah.
Right. That when they look at you like, wow, that's a good question. Okay. And then making them think a little bit. That's how you build that trust.
Yeah. I didn't think of that.
And if we're not getting them to engage on that level, then we're not doing our job. And I think it starts with, I always position it as empathy rather than caring, but the emotion you're eliciting from that prospect is that this guy cares or this gal cares about whether or not I'm going to be successful, and whether this is a good fit. Did you have formal training as you moved through those corporate? They probably threw a lot of different sales training at you. Which ones of those did resonate with you?
Yeah, until I became a sales VP, I'd probably been through a dozen different sales trainings. God, I remember ones where they would video you, and then play back the video and everybody would critique it.
Yeah.
I remember questioning-based etiquette, target account selling, Sandler. I wasn't a big fan of Sandler until I understood it better. Opening a meeting with "Why am I here?" Customer just looks at you like, "What do you mean? Why are you here?"
Yeah, the context for that is hard to relate until you really get into. I mean, that takes a little guts.
Yeah.
To do what David actually taught. But I think the biggest problem. I mean, I'm Sandler trained. 30 years ago, I paid my own money to do that. And I think the biggest problem with Sandler is that salespeople use it as a weapon, rather than as a great methodology to ask questions. I still find it coming out of my mouth without me thinking, like reversing. Why would you do that when, it's the right thing for them to do? But if they say it, it's gospel. And if we say it, it's a freaking salesperson saying something.
Yeah. And,
yeah.
I think through all of those trainings, I picked up little things here and there. When I got that first sales VP job at Nexus, I went out and looked at Miller Hyman. I knew that my sales force needed a common language, a common process. I would ask some people, where are you at in the sales process? And I got 12 different answers. So I ended up going with customer-centric selling, which is questioning-based etiquette. It's buyer-centric. It's a lot of what many sales trainings teach. But the key to customer-centric is we integrated the team's solutions into the role plays. And so we had sales-ready messaging. The role plays were based on what they were actually selling, and therefore they adopted it more easily and executed against it better. And so, yeah, I became certified in 2006. And as a sales VP, I actually trained my own salespeople, me and one other guy, which I think was super impactful because I knew their industry and I knew how to coach them. And, and another thing that led me to all of this is, I love standing with a group of 30, 50 salespeople and giving them new skills that I know they're going to be more successful with.
There's a I don't know, a sense of, pride isn't the right word, but satisfaction
Mhm.
when you see the light bulbs go off
Yep.
in the room, and if you don't do what you're talking about in that training room, where you give them the theory, you give them the steps and the process, but if you don't relate it for them in that role play, and everybody hates role playing, but to me, it's the fastest way to integrate what they're going to use, that language you talk about, because they're all different, they're all the same, they all steal from each other, right? It's all there, but and we all have our preferences, but if we don't make it a language so that we can ask a question, like what stage of the process are we in? What's the next clear step? If we're not able to have that conversation, you get 15 different answers from 10 guys, and it's a challenge. Um,
I also think it's really important to have follow up. You got to follow up with the managers monthly. You got to do one-on-ones with the reps for at least a year. You got to make sure the managers are doing role plays with their teams so that this stuff sticks around for a while. And a lot of sales training companies fall short with that follow up and follow through. It's one of the biggest complaints I hear from sales VPs is, yeah, I put my sales force through sales training, but nobody uses it.
well, and I would ask that question back to them, like, what have you done to ensure that it is coached on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? What are you doing in your sales meetings to help, right? Because it's almost like people do training
Mm-hmm.
and think that 3 days is going to like be the inoculation to solve all the problems. And I've actually seen companies train the sales reps and like, hey, where are the sales managers?
Right.
Well, they already know this stuff.
Yeah.
No, they don't. They don't. They have no idea. This is go get them and bring them in here, because that is, they're the ones that are going to carry that through. They're that threat, and if they don't understand what's being taught in that language, you might as well be speaking in a foreign tongue.
Yeah, they have to be there. I like to make them coaches of the role plays. And so I do a pre-session with all the managers, and teach them what they need to coach during the role plays. Then they adopt it further and take it a lot more serious.
So let me pivot a little bit. We actually talked about discovery because we talked about process and methodology,
Right.
being able to ask those questions. But I kind of want to get your perspective on something that I've been working on with salespeople. And the idea of prospecting seems to be like a big scary word to salespeople. And even if we call it outbound, that still is sort of impediment. So I'm trying to reframe this concept of prospecting as just having this conversation and reframing it. And I wonder if you have any insights as to, because the audience is, business owners and entrepreneurs and senior salespeople, as well as salespeople. And, maybe we can help them see that prospecting is essential and critical. They know that.
Oh, for sure.
But if we don't do it and start putting stuff in the top of the funnel, nothing comes out the bottom.
That's right. That's the, science part of sales. It's a numbers game. You got to know your numbers. So, my take on modern prospecting is what I call it is, it's really hard to do anything cold. Cold email, cold calling, unless your messaging is spot on and your timing is really good. The hit rates are so low nowadays. And so I actually like to warm those prospects up on LinkedIn. And so I go to LinkedIn, I find my ideal buyer, and then I follow them, I ring their bell, and I engage with their content, because LinkedIn notifications are a beautiful thing. If I look at somebody's profile, it says Dave Elsner looked at your profile. Then 3 days later, I follow them. Now they see Dave Elsner is following you. And then I start engaging with their content and trying to have a conversation with them, not just hitting the like button, actually making comments,
Yeah.
Do we,
That are meaningful.
yes, that demonstrate your expertise. And by doing that, it creates this curiosity, and they end up looking at my profile. That's my door opener. Now I can send them a connection request because they're interested in what I do and who I am. And now we can start having a conversation. And so I'm not saying get rid of email and cold calling. I'm saying warm them up first. Get your brand known. If somebody sees my brand 5 to 9 times, they become comfortable with me and the barriers start to break down. And now that we're connected, they start seeing my content and all the value that I offer. They see that I'm a subject matter expert. And so when I make that call or email, my open rates go way up. And if the timing's not right, they're going to see me every day on LinkedIn, and eventually they're going to reach out. I do no outbound as a result. All of my business comes inbound because of things like podcasts and LinkedIn and YouTube, and driving traffic to my webpage. And it's a beautiful thing. Like, show the value and they will come.
And the other really, I love that. And you can automate some of that, but the big piece of that has to be when you start to engage with content, it has to be authentic, because they'll see through that if it's just some fake BS. But the other thing is that it's not spammy. Mm-hmm. It's not that salesy BS where somebody, DMs you or asks for a connection and then immediately drops into a pitch. For me, that's a delete immediately.
Me too.
But and maybe you know the answer to this question. How do I get on that franchise list of you have a wonderful background, your resume, blah blah blah, and we have this wonderful franchise opportunities. It's like, did you even look at my profile?
Yeah,
I've asked them, they never answered the question. I wonder if you have any insight into that.
Yeah, no, hey, those are bots. They've got a bot working that pulls a list of 1,000 people and sends the same message, and we call it the connect and pitch or the pitch slap. And
I heard that the other day.
And the funny thing is, they say, based on your profile, you look like you could be a good business owner. It's like, I am a business owner. You didn't look at my profile, obviously.
Yeah, your AI isn't working. Your automation isn't working.
Right.
But when you type that in and say, your automation is failing you, they respond like you've positively responded. They don't even read it. They just go to the next step in their process.
Yeah, there's no room for that kind of automation on LinkedIn. If it's not personalized, if you're not actually networking, and by the way, referral-based networking is one of the best things about LinkedIn. When I look at somebody's profile, I can easily identify all the people we know in common. And from there, I can do referral-based networking, or I can name drop, which makes them more comfortable with me. But yeah, the trend of automation and AI in these kinds of tools is hurting it. My first sales manager job, I had the best mentor in the world. I was so lucky. He was super successful as a manager, and I was the top salesperson. They're always worried about promoting the top salesperson because you're going to lose those results. What they didn't realize is that they're going to get 5 times those results now.
I like to, we've talked about a few things that I think are that give a perspective. You obviously have a lot of success in your career. What's the best way? One of these business owners hears you, heard what you said, and wants to reach out. What's the best way to reach Dave?
Yeah, all of my branding is under the Tech Sales Coach. So LinkedIn, YouTube, and my webpage is thetechsalescoach.com. So those are the easiest ways. I'm in LinkedIn a couple hours a day. So that's probably the quickest path to me.